Night one of the WWE Draft has come and gone, and not a lot changed. And honestly, I'm not surprised. This is one thing I thought about going into the draft, that not many people really needed to move. And I think there's been a lot of, I don't want to say complaining, but a lot of people questioning on social media throughout SmackDown and, hereafter as to why WWE is even doing a draft, because we don't see a lot of change on night one. Now, granted, a majority of the roster is still to be drafted on Raw, but a lot of the big names I don't see moving places. To me, I think WWE just does this draft because it's more of a sports-like presentation. They get 2 nights out of it, so it feels like a bigger deal. I honestly think that's why they do the draft the way they do in 2024 and how they've been doing it the last several years. They could knock it out all in one night. They could, call it something else, a draft lottery where they just do a couple random picks, but they know they can make it a bigger deal. And honestly, the presentation is great. So even though there's not a lot of, shake-up in the rosters, again, I really don't think it's needed. And plus, I think WWE is just doing it for the presentation anyway. But that's not to say there wasn't a couple of changes in Raw and SmackDown tonight. We're going to run through every single pick in every single round. There's been a couple of picks to fill out the draft night one on WWE.com or social media, whatever you want to say. So we're going to run through all of them. I'll give my thoughts. Now, first thing, as we found out at the top of SmackDown, Roman Reigns pulling out of the draft, which I really liked, because Roman Reigns, as Paul Heyman stated, out indefinitely. We don't know when Roman Reigns is coming back, but with Roman Reigns on the board, it's kind of an obvious number one. Why wouldn't Roman Reigns be drafted above all else, especially when the WWE champion Cody Rhodes, we already know, is indefinitely staying on Friday Night SmackDown, as are all the champions, which that is something that I was really happy that they changed this year in the draft, just keeping the champions on their brands and no reason for them to be in the draft pools. But Roman Reigns pulling out of the draft just as the draft was technically started kind of added a quick element of surprise to this thing. Looking at the draft pool night one, once Roman Reigns was taken out of it, it's like, all right, well, Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, the Bloodline, obviously a big entity, but like Solo Sikoa, been a while since he's won a match. The Bloodline caused a lot of chaos. If you really think about this in a storyline perspective, is this something that the GMs want on their brand and now have something to think about? It might be a little bit more worth it when they were getting Roman Reigns, but now they're not. I just like that whole thing that, Roman Reigns extracted himself from the draft, because it kind of opened up who was going to be number one for SmackDown. But then getting into the draft picks at number one, going to Friday Night SmackDown, we had Bianca Belair. Bianca staying on Friday Night SmackDown. Honestly thought there was a chance her and Jade would end up on Monday Night Raw. Jade is going to be drafted on Raw this Monday night, but she could end up on SmackDown, which I do believe she will be. I think her and Bianca will be staying together, especially because they have a Women's Tag Team Championship match as announced on SmackDown coming up at Backlash next week against Asuka and Kairi Sane, which I honestly do think they will win the Women's Tag Team Championships, Bianca and Jade. So Bianca staying on SmackDown. I do expect Jade will be drafted to SmackDown this coming Monday night on Raw. Jey Uso staying on Monday Night Raw, number one contender for the World Heavyweight Championship. I do think there's a very good chance that Jey is going to be winning a singles title in 2024. Maybe the Intercontinental Championship, maybe the World Heavyweight Championship. I don't know, but Jey staying on Monday Night Raw, no problem there. I honestly thought there was a chance that, and as I talked about in a couple of videos, that the Bloodline, regardless of who that was going to, feature, the Bloodline getting drafted, would end up on the same brand as Jey. We'll see how the year plays out. I do still think Jey, Jimmy, and Roman ending up on the same side to fight Solo Sikoa and company will be where we head in the back half of 2024. But as for now, Jey staying on Monday Night Raw. Carmelo Hayes, the first NXT pick, and going in the first round to Friday Night SmackDown. And I loved what they did with Carmelo Hayes on SmackDown tonight, drafting him in the first round. The second pick to Friday Night SmackDown immediately comes out and is in a segment with the WWE Champion Cody Rhodes, which immediately sets up a harmless main event where Carmelo Hayes looked great against the WWE Champion, obviously falling short. Carmelo Hayes is going to be a player on SmackDown. He is definitely going to win a championship. If not in 2024, by next WrestleMania, I expect gold to be around the waist of Carmelo Hayes. That is a legit game changer to the main roster. Him being on SmackDown, already making an impact on night one. And technically, he's already appeared on the main roster, has had a couple of outings. I think he even wrestled Finn Balor at some point last year or whenever it was. But Carmelo Hayes obviously has been in a couple of appearances on the main roster, but now officially on Friday Night SmackDown. As we expected, he would get drafted, but Melo already make an impact on night one. And then last but not least, closing out the first round, Seth freaking Rollins, when he returns, will be staying on Monday Night Raw, which again was kind of expected. I thought there was a chance that maybe the Bloodline go to Raw, Seth Rollins maybe goes to SmackDown, but then you got the Becky Lynch factor in there, staying on Monday Night Raw, so that kind of threw a wrench into the plans. And Seth Rollins, CM Punk, Damian Priest, Drew McIntyre. Like, I just think those 4 guys are going to be surrounding that World Heavyweight Championship. Maybe not for the rest of the year, but definitely for the summer. You know, I think Drew McIntyre versus Damian Priest at Clash of the Castle is very possible, with McIntyre possibly winning the belt there. CM Punk and McIntyre at SummerSlam for the World Heavyweight Championship just sounds about right. And if Punk, you know, is going to be obviously wrestling for the World Championship, I expect Seth Rollins to not only want his championship back, but to also want to finally have that match with CM Punk. So them all staying on the same brand kind of makes the most sense to me. We already got half of that puzzle. Punk and McIntyre are going to be drafted on Raw on Monday night. We'll see where they end up, but I think they will be staying on Raw along with Seth Rollins. And then we move to the second round. Randy Orton staying on Friday Night SmackDown, which I was very happy about. Orton being on the same brand as Cody Rhodes was top priority for me, as I mentioned in multiple videos and live streams throughout the week building up to this draft. Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes, one of the major feuds for not only Cody Rhodes, but also Randy Orton over the next year. That's a matchup they could really pull out of the back of their, cards whenever, for SummerSlam, end of the year. They could save that for WrestleMania next year. Orton versus Cody is going to be a major feud when it happens, and Orton is going to be a legit candidate, in my opinion, to possibly dethrone Cody Rhodes when the time comes. So Orton being on SmackDown with Cody just made the most sense to me. Very glad that happened. Bron Breakker going to be on his way to Monday Night Raw. Breakker's been signed to SmackDown over the last few months. Obviously, really hasn't done much because he was still working in NXT. He was one half the tag team champions. But Bron Breakker, as we saw tonight, also going to be a player on the main roster. Beat Cedric Alexander in like freaking 12 seconds. And it looked like an absolute beast doing this. I love Bron Breakker. I think it's same thing with Carmelo Hayes. Within the next year, there's a very good chance he's going to be holding championship gold. Remains to be seen. I want to get ahead of myself here, but Breakker and Melo, obviously 2 major players. It's like Cena and Batista. Like, those 2 guys I think are just going to parallel each other's careers for a couple of years now that they're on the main roster, one on one brand, one on the other. A couple of years from now, they're going to link back up and have those rematches, that the match that they already had in NXT, but it's going to be that much better a couple of years from now when they're acclimated on the main roster and have had some accolades and some big time matches against other established stars. But Bron Breakker going to Monday Night Raw. And then we get another roster change, not really a game-changing one, but Nia Jax going to be on Friday Night SmackDown. I don't want to say not a game-changing one, because Nia's been prevalent on Monday Night Raw, feuding with Becky, Liv, Rhea, and all that stuff. But Nia, not somebody who I see winning a women's championship anytime soon, but as we can see coming out of SmackDown, probably going to be somebody who's challenging for the women's championship in the near future. Bayley set up to fight Tiffany Stratton and Naomi in a triple threat at Backlash next week. Should be a fun matchup. Nia Jax laying out Bayley night 1, and Naomi as well upon getting drafted to SmackDown. So I expect Nia Jax to probably be challenging the winner, which will most likely be Bayley, after Backlash for the WWE Women's Championship, which I don't mind. They have some history down in NXT, and I know they feuded probably a little bit on the main roster, but obviously their best history was down in NXT. And to be fair, no shots at Nia Jax. Ever since she returned last year, this has been the best run, in my opinion, of Nia's career since her NXT days. So I really don't have a problem with Nia and Bayley. I think they might be able to do something half decent on SmackDown. But Nia winning the championship, that's another story. I don't think that'll happen. But Nia on SmackDown, and then Liv Morgan staying on Monday Night Raw, which I expected because I do see her and Becky Lynch running it in the near future. Maybe not the near future, but within the next few months, and Liv winning the Women's World Championship just makes the most sense. We made a whole video talking about that the other day. And then we move on to round number 3. We had LA Knight staying on Friday Night SmackDown. To me, LA Knight was going to end up wherever AJ Styles ended up, or vice versa, because LA Knight got drafted first. But there's unfinished business there, as AJ even mentioned in his promo tonight with Cody Rhodes. LA Knight won at WrestleMania. AJ won last week on SmackDown. There is a rubber match at hand, especially because AJ Styles cheated to win, put the thumb in the eye of LA Knight to become number 1 contender. So I expect to get through SmackDown next week, get through Backlash. I expect Cody Rhodes to retain the WWE Championship, obviously, and what I'm sure will be a stellar matchup in France at Backlash. And then after that, AJ and LA Knight, they got to link up for one more matchup where I do believe LA Knight will come out the victor of the feud. Obviously, AJ got drafted a little later. We will talk about that when we get there. And honestly, round 3 saw absolutely no change. LA Knight going to SmackDown, Ricochet staying on Monday Night Raw, The Bloodline staying on Friday Night SmackDown, which was just Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and Paul Heyman getting drafted. No Jimmy Uso, no Roman Reigns. I guess Jimmy's technically not in The Bloodline anymore, but we'll cross that bridge, I guess, when Jimmy gets back. I don't expect him to. I think he might have even been listed in the draft pool originally Maybe he's lifted on Mondays. I don't know. I got to check, but I really don't see a need for Jimmy to even be drafted until he makes it back to television, honestly. So, nonetheless, the Bloodline to SmackDown and Sheamus staying on Monday Night Raw. Honestly, I mean, outside of Ricochet, all those picks kind of made sense to me. And not that Ricochet didn't make sense, but like you could have thrown Ricochet on SmackDown. It would have been like, okay, like it really didn't make a difference. But the rest of these guys, Sheamus being on Raw with McIntyre, where there's something brewing, makes a lot of sense. The Bloodline staying on SmackDown. We saw tonight them interact with Kevin Owens and Orton. They got a tag match at Backlash. Kind of makes the most sense right now. And then the final televised round on SmackDown saw AJ Styles staying on Friday Night SmackDown with LA Knight, with Cody Rhodes again. Already talked about it. Unfinished business. A rubber match with LA Knight. Definitely coming in the near future. Alpha Academy in its entirety staying on Monday Night Raw. Again, not sound like a broken record, but kind of make the most sense. Chad Gable, unfinished business with Sami Zayn. Obviously going to run it for the Intercontinental Championship. Zayn staying on Monday Night Raw. Or I should say protected pick, if you will. Guy who is staying on Raw, already the Intercontinental Champion. Chad Gable going there. Again, just makes the most sense. We also had Andrade moving to Friday Night SmackDown. So one of the actual moves in the draft saw Andrade moving to SmackDown. Looking forward to it. We saw tonight, finally got the reveal that Carlito was indeed the one who laid out Dragon Lee before WrestleMania, which I think we all expected. So where Carlito's going to fall, I don't see him to really be aligned with anybody. I don't see him jumping to Legado del Fantasma, but Andrade coming in and possibly aligning himself with the LWO, I can definitely see that in the near future. And then the final televised pick heading to Monday Night Raw was NXT's Kiana James. And no disrespect to Kiana James when I say this, but this is, I was a little confused because like they said NXT stars eligible for both nights of the draft. A couple of weeks ago, though, Ilya Dragunov, Raw After Mania, on that show, and then that night, they go out of their way to make a post saying Ilya Dragunov has declared for the WWE Draft. But then we get the last, weekend, or last few days, I should say, where they're revealing the draft pools and the rules, and they're saying, basically every NXT star is available. And listen, I get it. We're just, kind of pulling some people. Kiana James, I don't expect her to come back or to come up to the main roster and make any sort of impact anytime soon. Honestly, don't know much about her. The only match I've ever saw from her is the one I saw live at Stand and Deliver, as you can see the poster back there. But so no disrespect to her, but if every NXT superstar is eligible, this is where the logic gaps kind of come in. It's like, well, if you could draft anybody in NXT, maybe outside of the champions, if, they're protected just like the Raw and SmackDown ones are, well, what's stopping, Triple H, or Adam Pearce or Nick Aldis from drafting Ilya Dragunov over Kiana James? What's stopping them from drafting Lyra Valkyria over Kiana James? So it's the same thing in 2016 where it was like, why did, so-and-so pick No Way Jose and Carmella when Shinsuke Nakamura and Samoa Joe were on the roster? It's like, I wish with the NXT people, it was like, they had to declare for the draft like college athletes had to declare for the NFL or NBA drafts and stuff like that, just so we knew the select talents that could actually be available and to try to make a little bit more sense out of it. It's not the biggest deal in the world. At the end of the day, like I said, I don't expect Kiana James to come up and make some kind of huge impact. If anything, they probably didn't have much for her down in NXT. Probably no plans to be a champion anytime soon. An extra body for the main roster, which could always use some extra women in the division. So no disrespect to her. I'm just saying a little bit of logic gap there. What was stopping, in storyline perspective, what was stopping Nick Aldis or Adam Pearce from drafting anybody else and then going, give me Kiana James? You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. But that was the final pick for television. The reason I waited a little bit to film this video tonight is because I figured they were going to do the same thing they did last year. Or maybe they did it on Saturday last year. But there was a couple extra picks made after television. So we got Cedric Alexander and Ashante the Adonis, I believe, staying on Friday Night SmackDown. No disrespect, but I don't expect them to be any game changers, especially since we just saw Cedric Alexander get cut in half in about 12 seconds to Bron Breakker tonight on SmackDown. So, and evidently they're a tag team. I think they did like one promo a few months ago, and I'm not sure if they've ever been on television as a tag team, maybe main event or something like that, but they got drafted together. They're on SmackDown. Alba Fire and Isla Dawn heading to Monday Night Raw, so they are a move in this draft. Another move, Baron Corbin back on the main roster finally. Went back down to NXT last year, completely reinvented himself, and absolutely is the best version of Baron Corbin since 2016, 2017, and I'm happy to see it. Maybe better than he was then. Baron Corbin is heading to Friday Night SmackDown. So Corbin getting the call back up to the main roster, but obviously not going to be teaming up with Bron Breakker. A little disappointed. I think there was some potential for that team to have a little bit of a run on the main roster, and obviously Bron Breakker doesn't need it, and neither does Baron Corbin, but obviously the tandem worked in NXT. It was hugely popular, had a great run as tag team champions. Not that it lasted that long, but point is, had a great run as a tag team. I'm just saying maybe could have did it on the main roster, but obviously they got different plans, most likely for Bron Breakker, and we'll see what happens with Baron Corbin over on SmackDown. But I'm happy to see Corbin back on the main roster and back on Friday Night SmackDown. Hopefully he does big things, because I want to see him do big things. I was a big Baron Corbin guy back when he first came to the main roster in NXT. I still have his first hoodie that they released for him in 2017. I don't know where it is, but I have it. I was a big Baron Corbin guy for a while there, and then he became the Constable, then he became the King, then he became JBL Moneybags, and it was just an absolute, terrible creative for him. Not his fault, but point is, I'm happy to see him back on the main roster. Hope he does big things, is Baron Corbin. Ivar staying on Raw, Gallows, Anderson, and Chin staying on Friday Night SmackDown, and Shayna Baszler, as well as Zoe Stark, staying on Monday Night Raw. So a lot of superstars staying on their brands. Again, as I said on the top of this video, although I understand the complaint, or at least just the conversation that people are bringing up, what's the point of doing a 2-day draft if a lot of the people are just going to stay on their brands? I get it. I'm kind of right there with you. I'm just also, I'll be honest, I'm fence sitting here and going, WWE's probably just doing it for the presentation, the sports-like atmosphere. If they get 2 nights out of it, it feels like a big deal. That's probably why they're doing it, honestly. And they've been doing it the last few years. They're just keeping it going. If it were me, the draft would be one night, maybe not even on Raw or SmackDown, maybe on a special Saturday presentation, and it was just a lottery thing, like in 2004 when Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman were pulling names out of the tumbler. I don't know. Maybe that's all you need to do. But if WWE wants to do this big grand thing just to move a couple of names, it is what it is. I'm just hoping come Monday, maybe Gunther goes to SmackDown. I'd like to see that move. Off the top of my head, though, I see a lot of names staying where they're at. Honestly, I see Kevin Owens staying on SmackDown. I see Drew McIntyre and CM Punk staying on Raw. But we'll see what happens come Monday. But let me know your thoughts on the draft night 1 down below in the comments, as we have come on here after SmackDown. We will be here after Raw on Monday night. I do want to mention last year, and I'm not even sure if it was announced ahead of time. I think it was on The Bump or whatever show that they were doing on YouTube, or whatever the case is. On the Saturday between last year's draft, there was some random picks that went out, and it was a couple NXT picks. That's when Apollo Crews and Zoe Stark and whoever the hell else got drafted to Raw and SmackDown, and whoever. It wasn't on SmackDown, it wasn't on Raw, it was the weekend. So if that happens again this year out of the blue, I'll make a video tomorrow night, but they haven't said anything about that, so remains to be seen. If that happens, you'll see me again this weekend. If not, you can catch me after Monday Night Raw this coming Monday. But go follow me across social media at Noah Nation Vlog. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. And again, leave your thoughts on the draft night 1 in the comment section. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.